Welcome back to the series The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni in episode 7. Prince Siddhārtha met with 4 messengers: the old man, the sick man, the dead man, and the monk. This appearance was just as the prophecy had said before. These meetings made the prince realize the suffering nature of life and determined to find the path to liberation. The prince shared his decision to leave with his pregnant wife, Yasodhara. Though heartbroken, Yasodhara understood and accepted. Their conversation demonstrated deep understanding and great love. Volume 7 also deals with the prince's premonitory dreams and reflections on the ephemeral nature of the material world. His decision to become a monk was motivated by his desire to find a comprehensive remedy for the suffering of sentient beings. The Life of the Buddha, Episode 8, The Birth of Rahula and King Suddhodana's Dream. Life continued to go on with its usual activities. However, in the Palace of Joy, there was no longer the bustling fun like before. After the princes were bored with the reform work, they also calmed down from the heated discussions with the enthusiasm of youth. If they met at some small parties, everyone seemed pensive. They were at a dead end before the meaning and value of life. The prince repeatedly asked King Suddhodana for permission to leave home to seek the way, but was always refused. He returned dejected, trying to hide his feelings from either Mahāpājapati Gautami or Amita Pamita, both of whom often took turns to take care of Yasodhara. King Suddhodana was heartbroken to see the prophecy of the past come true. All the measures to prevent it were in vain. The heart and mind of the prince were too high. The programs and plans to reform the country of the prince and the princes were too bold, too fair, too honest, and upright. How could they be compatible with the greedy and selfish hearts of the noble leaders in this country? And Kolia too. Although he strongly opposed it, deep down, the king knew that there was no reason to keep the phoenix in the red cage and purple attic. The prince had been an effective assistant to the king in all the affairs of the court without any fault. Everything was done properly, clearly, concisely, and distinctly, thanks to his penetrating intelligence and sensitive heart. The prince had probed to the root cause of poverty and backwardness to find the perfect strategy for the prosperity of the country. A perfect picture had just been sketched out, and everyone could imagine and see it clearly before their eyes. But what could be done when the Council of Elders voted against it? They opposed it, but none of their objections were substantial or weighty. If they had been wiser, they would have silently left. Was it heartbreaking? Heartbreaking for the human heart. What was the prince to blame? King Suddhodana was very sorry, because who knows, because of his passion for reform, the prince had to stay on the throne to care for the people and the country. Oh, man proposes, God disposes. There was one last reason. The king wanted a grandson to continue the family line, but now it was also nullified. Yasodhara was about to give birth, and Gautami predicted it would be a boy. So what hope could I have to keep the prince in this life? King Suddhodana was extremely sad. That night, the king fell into a long dream. In that dream, 7 strange phenomena occurred one after another like an uninterrupted flow. The first phenomenon, the king saw a huge flag, brightly colored, hanging on a high pole in the royal palace. The halo of the Saka heaven shone down from the heavenly palace, sparkling. Suddenly a gust of wind blew, the flag was blown away, falling far away. A moment later, a deva flew over, picked up the flag and hung it at the east gate of the city. The second phenomenon, the king saw 10 huge, majestic, and dignified elephants coming from the south, shaking and swaying the ground. On the leading elephant, there was a shadow of a person sitting. It was Prince Siddhārtha. The third phenomenon, the king saw a carriage covered with precious jewels, shining with a halo, drawn by 4 beautiful, luxurious white horses. The horses' nostrils breathed fire and smoke. The person riding in that carriage was Prince Siddhārtha. The fourth phenomenon, the king saw a very large wheel, studded with gems and gold, shining with a halo. The wheel rolled continuously, while rolling it emitted flashes of fire. The fifth phenomenon, the king saw a very large drum placed in the middle of the road from the palace to the mountain. Prince Siddhārtha held an iron drumstick to beat the drum. The sound of the drum was like thunder, echoing throughout the 9th heaven. The sixth phenomenon, the king saw a majestic fortress, both ancient and new, suddenly rising from the ground. Then it rose high, reaching up into the sky, surrounded by auspicious clouds of 5 colors. Prince Siddhārtha stood on that fortress. The halo around it was like the sun and the moon. He scattered baruna and pomegranate flowers. The fragrance was overwhelming. Millions of people were jostling each other to pick the flowers, and everyone was singing, joyful, happy. The 7th phenomenon. The king heard people crying miserably, looked back and saw 6 people in Taoist costumes, sobbing, crying, and covering their mouths with both hands. King Suddhodana was very worried. Normally, dreams at night would be forgotten or only remembered vaguely by morning, but the king remembered the 7 phenomena of the long dream last night clearly, every detail. This year, the king was 86 years old. It was only natural that he should die. The king had experienced all the glory, happiness, pain, and suffering of human life. It would be enough to leave at this time. There was nothing to regret or feel sorry about. But what about the prince? The king was worried that some bad omen would happen to him. As soon as dawn broke, the king announced throughout the capital that whoever was good at interpreting dreams should go to the palace to interpret dreams for the king and would be greatly rewarded. Some Brahmins came to see him. The king told them his dream. They pondered deeply, then bowed their heads and quietly asked to leave. They could not predict those strange phenomena. They had never been in books. The next day and the day after that, some Brahmins came here and there, but after listening, they also respectfully shook their heads and said goodbye. The king felt uneasy, more and more as if he could feel a fire burning inside him. Suddenly, his intuition told him to go to the Simhabanu shrine, light the lamp, burn incense, then kneel down, clasp his hands and pray. These are probably extraordinary signs that mortals cannot predict. So please, the angels and ancestors above, have mercy and come down to interpret this dream for me. Whatever the truth may be, I completely accept it. As soon as the prayer ended, a tall Taoist priest appeared outside the palace, with snow-white hair and beard, wearing a majestic tiger-skin coat. No one knew where he came from, and he did not give his name, but said to the guard, "Take me to the palace and summon the king. I will explain to him the 7 phenomena of the dream." King Suddhodana caught a glimpse of the majestic, dignified figure that exuded a noble, ethereal air, and guessed that he was a divine being. So he quickly stepped forward, kindly invited him to sit down, and then told the story in detail to the monk. The story just ended. The Taoist bowed and exclaimed, "I would like to congratulate the king. The dream and the 7 phenomena are all good omens." The king breathed a sigh of relief. The Taoist continued, "The first sign, the shining halo flag of Saka heaven, symbolizes the religious ideals of thousands of years in this country, which our heavenly Lord has always admired and worshipped. The human world has always respected, worshipped, prayed to. To be more specific, that is the Vedic scriptures, Brahmanism with the belief in Brahma. That sacred flag falls down, meaning that tomorrow, the old religious ideals will lose all value, all power. The flag falls down and the gods plant it in another place. The symbolic meaning is that there will be another ideal, another belief, another religion to replace the old tradition. The person who can do that must have unparalleled, far-reaching wisdom. It only appears once every million years. That person is in this country, this capital, and it is Prince Siddhārtha and no one else. The second sign. The 10 majestic, beautiful, radiant statues, with each step shaking the earth, symbolize the 10 paramitas that the prince had practiced for countless past lives and now has completed and perfected. The prince sits on the statue at the forefront, majestic, heroic, proving that thanks to the energy of those 10 paramitas, he will attain the supreme enlightenment. Not only will the earth shake, but the entire 3,000 worlds will shake. The third sign. The prince rides on a beautiful chariot pulled by 4 horses, whose nostrils spew fire and smoke. This symbolizes the teachings of the 4 noble truths that the prince will attain in the future. That attainment is not simple. It must go through a long period of asceticism, tasting bile, lying on thorns, hardships, and suffering. To achieve it, his nostrils spew fire and smoke. The fourth sign. A large wheel with a halo, rolling and shooting fire. This symbolizes the precepts established by the future Buddha. These precepts, depending on the time, the occasion, each precept violation, each country, on the path of propagating the Dharma are established to counteract the evil phenomena, rolling and shooting fire, occurring in the Sangha. The wheel with a halo indicates that these precepts are bright and strict for the four groups of people from all directions to rely on and rely on. Fifth sign. The prince used an iron mallet to beat a large drum, symbolizing that the Buddha would later beat the drum of Dharma to resound throughout all realms. The sixth sign. The fortress grows out of the ground and stands tall, towering in the middle of the void, symbolizing the nature of both the world and the other world of the building of enlightenment. That enlightenment must grow from the ground, from the human heart, from the world, from the suffering of the world, like a lotus flower growing from the bottom of the mud. The Tower of Enlightenment rises straight up in the middle of the void, towering among the clouds, symbolizing the enlightenment of the Buddha, who has transcended the gods and humans and is their teacher. At that place, on the top of that tower, the Buddha will preach the Dharma, bestowing pearls and jewels to all living beings. The prince scatters fragrant flowers to millions of people. Seventh sign. 6 people cry and cover their mouths. That is the 6 heretical lawyers. When the Dharma has been proclaimed by the Buddha, like the sun illuminating the darkness of ignorance, all heretical religions in the world will no longer have a place to use their power. After interpreting the king's dream, the Taoist smiled and spoke in a gentle, calm voice. Your Majesty, like a stream of water pouring from a high source, they are the condensation of countless drops of water from all the crevices, caves, and streams. The prince's mind stream from countless previous lives has condensated the 10 great paramita powers, so there will be no power in the world that can stop it. The water will find its way to the great ocean, that is certain. The mind stream condensing the 10 paramita powers will flow to the ocean of enlightenment, that is certain. Our prince, in the future, will be the supremely enlightened one who saves all beings. Your Majesty should be happy. Having said what needed to be said, the Taoist slowly retreated, his shadow gradually fading and disappearing. King Suddhodana suddenly rubbed his eyes and shuddered. He wondered if what had just happened was real or a dream. Thinking back to the dream interpretation, the king muttered, "The hermit was right. If the mind stream with the 10 paramitas is truly like this, then no one can stop it. It will return to the sea of enlightenment. Oh, sooner or later my son will leave." However, a moment later, the king thought, "In more than half a century of being king, I have never surrendered, given up, or been weak before anyone else's will. Even Emperor Kosala had to respect me for that. It is an omen, not a reality. So I must resist that omen, defeat the prince's will to become a monk, no matter how much strength and power I have." As for the prince, during that time, he was always close to Yasodhara, taking care of her so that she could rest assured while pregnant. Perhaps these were the last days he would express his deep affection for someone whom he knew had been married to, shared joys and tears, and had loved and guided each other through many reincarnations and births and deaths. Her wonderful beauty was not only in her perfect appearance, but also in her soul, personality, and understanding. But sooner or later, she would have to say goodbye. A deep call from a previous life appeared in his 3 dreams. They were like a warning, telling him not to hesitate, to procrastinate forever in the siege of the finite, of birth, aging, sickness, and death. In the last month before giving birth, according to traditional customs, Yasodhara had to return to her mother's hometown. But Mrs. Amitabhamata said that the long journey would cause miscarriage, so she convinced the 2 kings that this custom should be broken. That correct decision was approved by the royal families of both sides. So Mrs. Amitabhamata felt secure in staying in Kapilavatthu to take care of her daughter. Both mothers now seemed to be staying in the Joy Palace. Every day she instructed the maids to take care of food and drink, avoiding anything too spicy, too hot, or too cold that could affect the fetus. Especially, she kept the atmosphere cheerful and peaceful, not allowing anything to go against Yasodhara's wishes or displeasure. A few days before the birth, 2 talented royal physicians sent by King Suddhodana were also required to be by her side. The most skillful midwife in the palace also took on the same task. Yasodhara was very cheerful, showing no signs of worry or fear, which reassured everyone. King Siddhārtha could not sit still either, pacing back and forth. The feeling of having a grandson, a long-cherished dream, made the king's heart flutter and beat. Unable to stop himself, the king ordered his servants to prepare the carriage so he could go visit his daughter-in-law. The prince greeted the king from the courtyard. The king was tall, graceful, and strong, but the prince was half a head taller. The Aryan lineage was evident in the prince's figure, complexion, nose, and blue eyes, which were more pronounced than the king's. After visiting Yasodhara for a while, and seeing that everything was well prepared, the king was pleased and expressed his praise for the two mothers. As he prepared to return to the palace, the king said to the prince, "You are about to have a new duty, the duty of being a father. It is the most sacred duty, remember that." "Yes, I understand. As a superior breed, it needs a good, worthy education, so as not to bring shame to its ancestors." "Yes, I understand." After a moment of contemplation, as if he had made up his mind, the king said again, "After the child is born, I will choose an auspicious day and time for you to officially ascend the throne. There can be no more delay." His voice suddenly dropped. "I am too old, my strength has declined, my mind has decreased. You must know how to love your family, your wife and children, your parents, your bloodline, and this country too." The king did not show any strong determination in referring to the prince's renunciation as an immoral matter, or a romantic metaphysical idea, as he had a few days ago. Instead, he cleverly used emotions. The prince also knew the king's dream and the strange priest's interpretation. Thus, using emotions was the last resort. The king wanted to soften the prince's will. That day, a quiet atmosphere enveloped the Palace of Joy. Everyone entered and exited cautiously and gently. When Yasodhara complained of severe abdominal pain, the royal physician immediately took her pulse and announced the time of birth. The midwife, 2 mothers, and several maids were in the inner room. 2 royal physicians and several other maids were on duty in the outer room. The prince sat a few doors away, and although he could not hear anything, he felt an indescribable uneasiness. His heart sank. The prince walked back and forth, feeling his heart burning. A vague anxiety and restlessness surged up and down like waves, refusing to stay still. Oh, his mother, Mahamaya, had given birth to him. It was said to have been very easy. However, giving birth is a barrier that any living being must pass through. The mother alone must cross the ocean with countless storms and tempests. To overcome it is to live, to not overcome it is to entrust her life to death. Sometimes one gains the mother but loses the child. Many times one gains the child but loses the mother. In some cases, both mother and child are lost. Oh, how terrible is birth! This birth is also a messenger that brings terror to the world. It is also the final motivation that helps me to leave home, helps me to bravely carry out the supreme path. I must find the path to immortality. As the prince tried to regulate his breathing to suppress his emotions, there was a strange silence inside. How was Yasodhara? Was something wrong with her? He listened carefully, feeling both worried and scared. Suddenly he heard the sound of a baby crying. Lady Gautami opened the door and walked out, looking at him and smiling. "Mother and child are safe and sound, my prince." He came out as if stretching his arms and legs. What a handsome boy. The prince wiped the sweat from his forehead, sighed, and felt relieved. "Thank you so much, Mom." The prince bowed his head and imagined the image of his son in his mind. He did not know whether he was happy or not, but this was a very important matter. Especially for him, having a son would be a bond. Having a son, his father would crown him as king. It would be the second bond. Suddenly, the prince exclaimed, "Rahulo jato bananjan tia," meaning, "A son is born, a bond is also born for me." The voice of Lady Gautami whispered in the prince's ear, "Will the prince name it?" "Yes, mother." The prince will consult with Gopa. A moment later, the prince was allowed to visit the mother and child. A certain joy shone in Yasodhara's eyes. The baby lay on one side, wrapped in a scarlet silk cloth, looking pretty and plump, with big, round, dark blue eyes, as beautiful as a little angel. The prince walked over, smiled at Yasodhara, then bent down and gently stroked his child's cheek with great affection. "How are you, Gopa?" "Yes, I am fine, and I am very happy. Me too. There is something floating within me. This is the first strange feeling in my life, Gopa." The prince gently held the child in his arms with both care and respect. Oh, how fragile this life is. A life is sprouting, and becoming a living being. What is behind this life? Where did it come from to this life? Then it must endure old age, sickness, death, joy, tears to leave behind. In this uncertain life and death, is there always more suffering than joy? And what about the suffering and torment when one accidentally creates evil karma and then suffers the harsh consequences in evil paths? But, no matter what, is this sacred blood relationship really like a string that binds us forever in this endless cycle of life and death? Oh, so the clouds of worry darkened and weighed heavily on his heart. Can we name him Rahula? Gopa? Rahula? Yasodhara opened her eyes wide. Rahula. Oh, very well. She was silent for a moment. You named your son Binding, but I know nothing in this world can bind you. Hearing Yasodhara's sulky voice, the prince gently said, Come on, Gopa. You understand me too well. There was a long silence between the two. Yasodhara held her breath and sighed. Don't worry, my prince. I'm mentally prepared. With Rahula, I'm no longer afraid of being lonely. You are so wonderful, Gopa. I know you have understood me for a long time. The prince decided to become a monk. That year, he was exactly 29 years old. Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to the video about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, adapted from the work A Life, a Sun and Moon by Master Gioi Duc. This video series will be broadcast at 7 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel Buddhist Story. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the next episodes, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your relatives and friends. All your comments are very valuable to us. Please leave comments below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and see you again in the next episodes of the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni.